And Laura, you've started the recording as well?
Yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. I see where our attendance is growing, which is fantastic. I hope everybody's doing really well tonight. I think we're going to get started. It's 7 o'clock, so a few people are still trickling in, but that's great. I just wanted to welcome everyone to our second AECE Connect of 2023 on the ECE wage grid recommendations. Thank you for joining us tonight. We know our schedules are tricky at times and not always accommodating. As always, if you know someone who wanted to make it but couldn't, let them know that the recording will be placed on AECE's website. Just give us a few days to be able to transfer that over. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that AECE's office is located in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory and within the Métis homelands and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. I'm in Calgary, so I will acknowledge that land as well. We are located on Treaty 7 territory within the Métis homelands and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We acknowledge this land as the traditional territories of many First Nations, such as the Nehiha, Cree, Dene Sulene, Dene, Nakota Sioux, Stoney, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, and Niitsitapi, Blackfoot nations. The reason we make these land acknowledgements are to show our respect for the land and acknowledging the traditions of Indigenous people, and just as importantly, acknowledging our own ongoing journey in response to truth and reconciliation. A couple of the reminders, as I have here on the slide, is that I want to remind everybody that AECE Connects are a safe place to communicate and share information within the field. So please continue to keep that in mind when posing questions or comments in the question box. Or if there's an opportunity to share throughout the presentation, please keep that in mind. We want this space to continue being a safe place for everyone. AECE Connects are recorded, like I had mentioned before, and placed on the AECE webpage for easy reference. So if there's ever a follow-up piece or a question that's not answered, our admin, AECE admin, has the access to all those questions and we can get those answers for you. Couple updates. Now is a good time to purchase an AECE membership so you can receive the membership pricing for the AECE Essential Pieces Conference. A date has been set. Hopefully you've seen that advertised out there through the newsletters. It's May 26th and 27th. Registration will open shortly, so keep posted on the newsletter, keep posted on the website, and register as soon as you can. It is a virtual conference, so I anticipate it filling quite quickly. ECE Award of Recognition is also back, along with the Cheryl Brown Award of Distinction. So you'll see that coming out in the AECE newsletter as well. So please value those colleagues, co-workers, team members, other ECE educators, because we know there's so many of you that need to be valued and heard about the work that you do. So it's quite an easy process. Just click on a link and share the story of the individual. So now we'll hand it off to Mary Frances Smith, Miranda Brown, and Abby Saha to share the ECE wage grid recommendations. Welcome.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Mary Frances. I'm currently a Master's of Arts student in the Community Engagement through the School of Public Health with University of Alberta, and I'm currently doing this community engaged qualitative research project with AECE. And Abby?
Hi everyone, happy to be here. I'm Abaroop Saha. I go by Abby. I'm currently a Master of Public Health student at the University of Saskatchewan, and I've been working with Mary Frances and Miranda on this project over the past year.
Hey everyone, I am Miranda. I am currently in my second year of my Master's in Development Studies at York University. So thank you so much for having me again. This is the second time I've been here. Thank you.
I'd also like to thank AECE. You have been amazing partners throughout this whole process. Your dedication to your early childhood educators in Alberta is really inspiring. Your dedication, your tireless work on behalf of advocating for early childhood educators, your deep knowledge, your network is a singular focus in advocating on behalf of the educator and on behalf of our team. We really appreciate the work that you do. Thank you to our funders and our sponsors, the Community University Partnership, the Evaluation Capacity Network, the Edmonton Council for Early Learning and Care, and some of the funding also came from the Women and Children's Health Research Institute and SSHRC and the undergraduate research stipend. So there's a lot of resources that were working behind the scenes in our project. Just off the top, I want to say that we are going to present our wage grid that we've been working on for the last 8 months, but there are some things that are not included in the wage grid. Things that were kind of outside the scope of this project. And it doesn't mean that we aren't going to eventually include it. It's just for this particular phase, it wasn't part of the conversation. So funding pathways, we still have to look into. The research was conducted over last summer, so any initiatives or opportunities that came up since the summer hasn't been included, like the wage top-up that happened in November and December. Regional factors, supervision, non-certified staff, inflation, and attraction to the field. We really wanted to focus on how to keep educators that are currently working in the field. So this is just the start of a conversation. It's not the end. It's just the beginning, and we really hope that this begins a healthy discourse about fair compensation. But first, I want to start with a little story about Lorena. Lorena, not her real name, messaged us after we did the Child Care Now presentation, and she said, "Can you help me?" And I wanted to know a little bit more. So I asked, what do you need help with? And she said, well, I'm a level 3. I work in a rural daycare. I've been here for a long time, over 5 years, and I'm only making $16.90 an hour. Her story anchors us through this whole project. We always think about her and who she represents in the sector. So as you're listening to this presentation tonight, this is the person who we are thinking about as we're doing this work. Next, please. So we'll try and go quickly through the first part of our process. I know you're probably not very interested in research, but we did a lot of work to get to the compensation framework that we're going to describe. So we'll just quickly go through some of the research project and how we got to this place. We didn't just make stuff up. We actually did lots of research. Next. We started this project back in November of 2021 with a group of MRU, Mount Royal University capstone students. And then through the last few months, we've been working closely with Abby and Miranda to make this compensation framework report that was published 2 weeks ago. Next. We took a qualitative, community engaged research approach. What that means is that rather than looking at numbers, we wanted to look at the lived experiences of educators, which brings in the qualitative research approach. It's also a community engaged research project, which means that any decision that we made was shared with AECE. We didn't just come in and say, we are researchers, we come from the academic world, here's what our knowledge is about. We wanted to work in partnership with AECE in a community engaged approach, which means that we did all the decision making together. That being said, we used the AECE's mission and vision as our anchoring tenets. We really wanted to focus in on how do we do some of this work to look at better wages in order to be recognized as a profession? How do we do this work as having a value that is supported, value to the very important work that we do? So we use these two as our anchoring tenets. Additionally, we also used the roadmap to quality early learning and childcare system, specifically section 4 that looks specifically at being appropriately compensated for the work that you do. And we also had a perfect policy window. With a childcare agreement, there is a multilateral agreement that is bringing $3.8 billion of money into Alberta to improve the access to quality, affordable and flexible, inclusive early learning and care. It also looks at hoping to create 42,000 new spaces, which means that we have to recruit and retain up to 7,000 to 20,000 new early childhood educators by March 2016. So what we're hoping with this wage grid is that the fair compensation would attract workers to the field and keep people to the field. So why a wage grid? The wage grid recommendations for early childhood educators in Alberta, we really hoped was putting numbers to what we value. We value educators to be fairly compensated for their education, their experience, ongoing professional development and training. And we want those numbers to show how much care work is worth. Next. We also know that early childhood sector is incredibly complex. There's multiple stakeholders involved, such as educators ourselves, children, of course. Families are incredible stakeholders, post-secondary institutions who are doing pre-service training, government who makes a lot of the regulations and decisions, all of the allied agencies like GRIT and ARC who are supporting on the periphery, owners and operators, of course, and then we have economics, we have inflation, and we also have health that we saw just coming through COVID. So we have a lot of people, a lot of entities that are influencing how early learning and care works in Alberta. So we had to take all of these aspects into consideration. Through that work, the work that I started with the MRU students back in January of last year, I want to say thank you to Anita, Sophie, Quinn, and Stacy for their preliminary work on this. Through some of that research, we discovered that there's 3 pillars of stability. We wanted to think of this as a bridge, and I like to think of the Charles Bridge in Czechoslovakia as like kind of a perfect bridge. It's beautiful architecture. It moves people and commerce and ideas from place to place. And if you think of a bridge, they have pillars underneath that bridge, and each of those pillars is built up of materials. And if any one of those materials or any one of those pillars is unstable, then the whole bridge is unstable. So one of the first pillars that we saw was fair compensation. What does fair wages based on education experience really mean? As well as non-salaried compensation. Those are things like pension and benefits. Together, those make a fair compensation pillar. The second pillar is really about what is it like to work in the workplace? Do you have voice and agency about your decisions? Are you allowed to stay out for 5 more minutes with the toddlers in the snow because the snow just fell and they're incredibly interested? Do you have paid and protected time to do your pedagogical work? Do you have leadership and team support? Together, those create positive workplace conditions. And if any one of those things are unstable, the whole pillar is unstable. Last pillar is education and training. Is there a distinctive educational pathway into this career? Can you see career progression? Do you know where you can go next? And are you supported with quality professional development? Together, those make a pillar of support, and any one of those unstable makes the whole pillar unstable. But what we see is that all of these things have to work together, and the wage grid is just one element.
So all of this background information brings us to our purpose statement, which is to create a values-based wage grid, focusing on workforce stability and professional career building for ECs in Alberta. So we got started with some research questions on the next slide. And these were, what is considered a fair wage in comparable sectors? What are the elements in a values-based wage grid? What is happening in the early childhood sector in other provinces? What can the sector bear in terms of a wage grid? And what do ECEs say is fair compensation? So this is to be completed through community engagement. So this brings us to a research design, and we aim to answer these questions we had through a literature review where we looked at peer-reviewed articles, government documents, AC documents, and peer-reviewed research. We did an environmental scan of labor agreements from comparable sectors like education and health, and we looked for responsibilities and pay structures within those labor agreements. We also looked at ECE wage grid recommendations from other provinces, and we had exploratory conversations with British Columbia, Ontario, and Manitoba, which we'll get into in a bit. We did a critical assessment after that of principles and objections and assumptions and cautions, and we're planning to hold some more stakeholder engagement over the next few months to test the grid with stakeholders and interview VCs and owner-operators. So first, I'll go over some of our findings from the literature review. So in regards to ECEs, we found that ECEs are motivated to work with children, and that's one of the most significant reasons to enter the sector. This is usually correlated with an unfortunate stigma that working with children can often be equated to mothering, and it's often assumed to be enjoyable for women while having an emotional impact. But at the end of the day, this is still work despite there being altruistic tendencies. So concerns faced by ECs we found included sources of income, other caregiving duties, and unpaid labor. As well as on the bullets on the slide, we also found that some evidence suggests that younger workers are less likely to stay in demanding and socially complex sectors. Next slide. So our overall findings showed that there's no clear educational pathway or career progression for ECEs. Due to the lack of demographic information, we don't really know the challenges ECEs are facing in regards to ageism, racism, classism, and sexism. And without more data, we can't provide useful solutions. Furthermore, we found in our research that turnover is not clearly defined, and we don't know if ECEs are moving from role to role, shifting to a different role, exiting or leaving, whether their titles are changing. It's not defined very clearly. Turnover might be higher in infant and toddler rooms, and we found that it might even be up to 30% in the first year of an ECE working, or even 75% turnover rates by the third year of an ECE working. Certification, education, auspice, leadership, and workload all have an impact on these factors. In regards to funding, we found that we don't know the true cost of care and that funding pathways can often be complex. Cost of care can be affected by subsidies, rent fluctuations, professional development, flight support, and unknown salaries and responsibilities. Many strategies have been attempted to address effective funding pathways, and we also found that benefits can have a strong impact on turnover due to the hidden and indirect cost of health and well-being. Wages are a place of the overall picture of stability. So this brings us to our environmental scan. For the purpose of the project, we drove deeper into compensation components of similar social sectors that were very closely aligned with early learning and childcare. The environmental scan specifically looked at labor agreements of education and health sectors, as they would have gone through a rigorous process to achieve their agreements. We also looked at ECE wage recommendations from other provinces. And here we found that there have been varied approaches to grid development, no consistent wage increments in labor agreements across Canada, and there have been varied wage increments amongst ECEs across provinces. So this brings us to our exploratory conversations that we had. We talked to some of our sister organizations in other provinces about their journeys with developed wage grid recommendations. We found out and had exploratory conversations with BC, Ontario, and Manitoba. So first, we talked to Jody Kell from the Manitoba Childcare Association. We found that their wage grid is market-based, and it includes competencies, including knowledge, skills, and abilities with aligned job descriptions. Next, we talked to Emily Golick from the Early Childhood Educators of BC. In developing their wage grid, they understood that the quality of childcare depends on qualified and well-compensated ECEs. The wage grid needed to incorporate best practices, integrate policy and funding, recognize qualifications and experience, and set competitive wages while working with the existing certification legislation. And they used a compensation value-based philosophy. Lastly, we talked to Rachel Vickers from the Association of Early Childhood Educators Ontario and Carolyn Ferns from Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. When making their wage grid, they consulted with ECEs, partners, allies, and researchers to create a roadmap to universal childcare in Ontario. And they have continued to have conversations about decent work, Indigenous reconciliation, and advocacy for fair compensation for ECEs. The associations also knew that funding could be controversial and carefully considered how aspirational they could be in their recommendations. So we drew inspiration from all of these conversations and combined the feedback that we received to make a hybrid wage grid that caters to the uniqueness of Alberta. We say that it's Alberta grown. And this brings us to, on the next slide, our critical assessment. So these conversations led to a critical assessment, which had us explore our assumptions, biases, where we set out loud criticisms and objectives for the wage grid. We considered if we want to match or be leaders. We looked at whether the wage grid makes effective use of agreements. We considered where we would get pushback, where there would be unintended consequences of hiring ECE ones as they are cheaper, and whether the wage grid would acknowledge the lack, would acknowledge experience because there is a data desert and we might be missing some information. So this brings us to our motivation. So when looking at motivation, We considered if there's a sweet spot for educators to remain in the sector, and we considered how do we reward ECEs for their service. So these were three factors, mainly attraction. ECEs are highly motivated to work with children, and they're invested in the rights of children. Retention was an important factor, considering career progression, personal satisfaction, and feeling valued, and exit was a factor as well. ECEs may often experience poor career progression, workplace conditions play a factor in exit, and feeling undervalued does as well. So we anchored back to these issues faced by ECEs and what we were hearing through ACE and through the research. And we were starting to understand the nuance of the attraction, retention, and exiting, and wondered if the wage grid could help with all of these concepts. And that brings us to our assumptions. So we held certain assumptions and objectives when working on our compensation framework. Firstly, we wanted to contain the values that AECEA upholds, a movement towards continued professional learning, stable workforce conditions, and fair compensation with a long-term outcome of workforce stability. Next, we looked at whether we wanted to, how we wanted to encourage the development of high quality and highly valued workforce of early childhood educators. We wanted our work to be an equitable framework that accounts for the diversity of a highly feminized workforce. We want to encourage attaining higher education and see financial rewards attached. We want to lead to personal economic well-being for ECEs. We wanted our framework to attract and retain motivated ECEs while accounting for education, training, and experience. And we want to encourage working conditions that help stabilize this sector. We hope that our wage grid and our recommendations can be an advocacy tool for ECEs when they enter the sector and negotiate wages. We would like to reduce the perceptions of ECEs as hourly employees and raise the perception of them being salaried professionals, and make effective use of the joint federal and provincial funding. We hope that the recommendations get adopted by the government and are endorsed, and we would like to reduce the turnover of ECEs to other sectors such as retail, customer service, hospitality, healthcare, and education.
Okay, so using the mission and value of AECE as a foundation while aiming to achieve roadmap section 4 for wage grid development. The aim is to have well-compensated ECEs which are valued for both their education and their experience. So the compensation framework, again, as was mentioned, moves away from a market-based grid and encompasses early learning and childcare stakeholder values and various compensation concepts. So these are the, next slide, please. Oh no, sorry, back one, sorry. So as was previously mentioned, these were the values that are basically underpinning the grid. So now next slide, please. So we use stats, Canada wage data, as well as 2019 labor force survey data. So we made the recommendation for entry wages. And so basically this would be the target base values for each level. So the base value is based on the understanding that ECEs attaining their certification have entry-level skills and need to gain experience as they learn more with children, the sector, operators, families, and put theory to practice. So again, reminding that we wanted the wage grid to be palatable, comparable, defensible, considered living wages in Calgary, as well as tourism regions, and the expectation that once you achieve certification entry-level skills, you'll be rewarded for increasing a higher level of education and gaining experience in the field. Okay, so you can see that we have levels aligned with current levels of certification. So these are the levels that are mandated in law, but we hope to advocate for a level 4, so increases between the levels. So as we can see here that on the target grid that we're focused on both education and certification. And then while the averages are increase between the levels found in other provincial wage grids. So again, sorry, sorry, this was mentioned maybe in the previous presentation, but we focused on there's two different ways there's two different values that increase. And so going down between ECE level 1, ECE level 2, and ECE level 3, there's a 12.9% increase. And going across the grades, there's the 3% increase. And so we are aware that Alberta does need to aggressively recruit ECEs. And so when we were developing the grid, we wanted to make sure that it was focused on a clear educational pathways, and it reflects or mirrors the most coherent pathway to professionalization of the sector, as well as increasing retention within centers. And sorry, next slide, please. Okay, so another thing that has to be considered well with recruiting is that there has been identified push factors or factors that push workers out of the sector. So the push factors are numerous, and due to data deserts that exist, it's hard to pinpoint all of them definitively. However, some major push factors are financial concerns, working environment concerns, and a lack of flexibility or limited opportunity for advancement. And then, that is where non-compensation elements come in. So these are indirect or non-financial compensation components, and you can consider these like a part of the social contract between workers and employers. And those can consider things such as pensions, RRSP contributions, retirement plans, health benefits, health spending counts, all the various things listed above. You can see how some of the concepts are entwined with some of the pillars that Mary Frances had mentioned earlier. And sorry, next slide, please.
I'm going to just interrupt for a moment, if that's okay, Miranda.
Yeah, please. Thank
you. Can you go back one slide, please, Laura? Because I want to show the salaries, the wage grid salary, the salary grid. Yeah, so we had also converted the wages from the previous slide into salaries based on roughly 50 weeks a year for 2,080 hours per year. And so you can see the actual salary that we are hoping that ECEs could receive as they gain their certification and as they move through the grades. And the grades are about how do you increase your knowledge with experience and with tenure and with ongoing professional development. One thing that is not on this grid is once you get to grade 7, ECE 1, that is when what is currently seen as living wage in Alberta is attained. So around $15,000 is where the living wage is kind of where it starts in Alberta currently. So these are the things that we are hoping to encourage ECEs to receive as they're in the field. Christy, I suspect you have some questions.
There's just one question that keeps popping up in terms of the wage grid and the salary grid, and that is the government top-up included?
You know what, that is an excellent question. And we haven't worked out those details because that is a very nuanced math that we haven't really investigated in. So like I said at the beginning of the presentation this evening, there was a limited scope that we were able to achieve last summer. So we kept it kind of contained. If we were looking at some of the things that we really wanted to achieve and include in the wage grid, then we'd still be writing, unfortunately. But that is absolutely something that we're considering, is where does wage top-ups fit into this? How does wage top-ups fit into this? Do wage top-ups even need to exist? And is there a different way to approach this? These are questions that we absolutely do not have an answer to, because it involves more than just our small team and AC. This involves a lot more people to have that conversation. So wage top-ups, yes, we need to have that conversation still. That's why we're hoping this healthy discourse continues.
Thank you for clarifying that. There was a number of questions, so it was on people's mind. Thank you.
I bet. Anything else that we need to answer while we're here?
Yeah, I'm seeing some confusion of what, like, that grades. What does it really mean? What do you mean by grade?
Yeah, I thought there'd be some questions about that, and Miranda and Abby, step in at any time, please. So the grades, we still need to work on the nuance of what they are, but what we're looking at is as you move across the grades, it's both experience, hours, and competency, so tenure and education and experience is one of the three things that we're trying to hope to roll into some of the grades. Our research found that within the first 3 years of being in the sector, the knowledge and experience that you gain is incredibly fast, incredibly rapid. You learn a lot in the first 3 to 5 years. After 3 to 5 years, then your skills and knowledge and experience start to integrate, and your practice evolves and gets deeper. So what we're considering for the grades is grade 1 is the first year of experience in early learning and care. One of the things that we also hear is that when ECEs move from center to center, their experience doesn't come with them in terms of pay. So what we're hoping is that this does allow for that experience to travel with them. So grade 1 would be simply a year of experience. More nuanced, we're looking at, okay, within that year of experience, how has your practice changed? How has it evolved and deepened? By grade 2, that's as well experience with a year of experience in early learning and care, but also what are those things that you've learned after 2 years in the sector? Same thing with grade 3 and grade 4. It's 1 year of experience plus how does your practice evolve? What we're thinking is as you get to grade 4 to 5, that's when things start to evolve in your practice. So the grades would become every 2 years. So grade 5 would be every 2 years, and grade 6 would be every another 2 years. So these are all considerations that we're having with the grid. Again, not fully formed yet because we still need to have these conversations with frontline, with owner operators, with government. We have presented to government, but again, we don't make these decisions. These are just recommendations. This is just the start of a conversation. This is a conversation that hasn't been started at all. So we're hoping this does start a conversation about what does this look like? What should we include? Any clarity that you want to add, Abby and Miranda?
No, you explained that really well. In the existing framework we have of ECE level 1, 2, and 3, we wanted to provide a way to really recognize ECs for the level of experience that they have. And that was the main thought process we had behind creating these grades, was recognizing ECs for their experience. For those ECs who've been working a longer time at a certain grade level, we want them to be compensated equitably and accurately reflecting their experience and their knowledge and their competencies.
Miranda, anything else you want to add? I think you were good. Any other questions? Any other questions there, Laura or Christy, that we can answer right now?
I'm seeing a lot in regards to how will this happen and everything. And I think we just want to reiterate that this is at this stage. They are planning to do more consultations and further research to kind of figure out these more detailed pieces that everybody seems to be having questions of right now. So this is just step 1 of many to come. I do have in here though, how will this link with the work that AECE is doing around the competency framework?
Yeah, we are involved with that project. So it's still in process. The wage grid report that we did previous to the RFP is being used as a foundation for some of the work that is happening with the competency based assessment and framework that AECE is also involved in. So we're hoping that they align really well and that it'll be integrated. The elements that work for the competency framework. Some elements won't, of course, because it's a new process, new project, but it is being integrated into that. And thank you for clarifying that, Laura. This is absolutely just the first step. This is just a recommendation. It is not an endorsement or mandated. This is just the start of the conversation. Any other questions before we move on?
For clarity, your report does say that ECEs must be paid at least minimum wage by their employer before wage top-ups. This wage grid recommendation above shows the overall wages that ECEs should be earning, which may include the wage top-up funding and is considered a base wage. So when people ask if the grid includes wage top-up, in essence, it does. Thank you, Shay.
In essence, yes. Yes. Of course, minimum wage is law, so that's the minimum that anybody should be making. Plus with their experience and education, that's what we're hoping they move up the ladder and up the grid. Okay.
I think for now we can move on.
Okay, thank you.
People can keep
Miranda?
sending questions to us, and even if we don't answer the question or aren't able to answer them in this session, we do still have them and they will be followed up with.
Okay, so I think we can move to the last couple of slides. So as some of these were mentioned a bit earlier, so hopes for a wage grid. So a wage grid would, in theory, we hope create a sector that is respected and seen as professional. Again, reduce the perception of early childhood educators as hourly employees and raise the perception of salaried professionals. Make effective use of joint federal provincial funding, as was mentioned earlier, as well as factor in the economic well-being of early childhood educators as a system of early learning and care is being built. Sorry, and next slide, please. And I'm going to just pass it off to Mary Frances, and thank you everyone for your patience with while I was losing my voice. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Miranda. It's 9 o'clock where Miranda is, 9:30, so it's been a long day for her. So I want to call back to the 3 pillars that we had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Workforce stability, the wage grid recommendation that we have isn't a magic elixir. It isn't going to magically fix some of the issues that we are facing. We're facing some really significant issues with inflation and cost of living, the complexity of the childcare agreement. It's the wage grid we're hoping is a piece of that bigger puzzle. It's very complex. We hope the wage grid at least supports this process, allows us to have a conversation about what is fair compensation and what are the things that we do need to do collectively. How do we start a conversation together to have to work towards workforce stability, knowing that all of these things, all of these pillars are a factor. Next slide. So as we had mentioned, our next steps from the very outset of this project back in the summer was always to do stakeholder engagement. So we are really hoping that we can interview ECEs. How does this wage grid affect you? Do the values align? Are there things that we're missing in the wage grid? How would you like to be fairly compensated? We also want to talk to focus group of operators. We want to understand operators that currently use a wage grid. How would this work for you? How could this work for you? We want to figure out, we want to ask, what are the roadblocks? What are the obstacles that you see for us to implement this? And how can we work together in order for this to be used and endorsed? So we'll take that information and refine it through our presentations to the community. We really want to have some actual recommendations for AECE to present to Children's Services. Because they're such strong advocates for the educator, I think that they could be able to take this forward. We have done presentations to Children's Services, so they are aware of the compensation framework. And again, we're hoping to have more conversations about this. We are involved in the competency RFP with AECE, so we'll see how this can integrate with that. And hoping that if we have an opportunity to do phase 3, of course, that always requires some funding. We want to look at competencies, responsibilities, aligning those with job description, look at indexing over time with the inflation, understanding regional considerations, because we know that the tourism areas and the natural resource areas are very different. So will this wage grid work there? Can we start to include different levels like bachelor's, master's, PhDs? Are there things that we can put into the non-salary compensation, the pensions, the benefits? What are some things that we can add in there that ECEs want? Do they want a pension plan? What does a pension plan look like? Do they want a pension? They want a benefit plan. What does that look like? We also want to be able to understand at a school care and family day home, Indigenous perspectives, very unique. We also want to advocate for better data collection. In every jurisdiction we looked at, nobody has a good definition of turnover. So we actually don't know where ECEs go when they are no longer receiving direct care and therefore wage top-ups. We don't know if they've got a new job, if they've left just temporarily to go to school or have children. Have they left completely? Are they in a different sector completely? There's the things that we don't know. So we're hoping to advocate for better data collection. Next slide. Now, I just want to call back to the original slide with Lorena. This Yuri Bronfenbrenner quote is ubiquitous for children. But what if we applied this to ECEs? What if we were irrationally crazy about ECEs? What would that look like and feel like and sound like? That's what we're really hoping for. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have another 20 minutes for questions. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone. Laura, did you have any more that popped up? I know since the last question I asked, probably 20 more popped up all at once. And that's fantastic because like Laura had mentioned, I had mentioned earlier, we keep log of all these questions and try and get back and give you guys answers. And I know Mary Frances and our team here will use those questions within building up their research as well. So Laura, does anything stick out to you right now that you want to just share?
I'm just skim reading it. A lot of these, like I said, this is step one. So you guys are asking fantastic questions. But I think at this stage, it's not necessarily ones that we can answer. That said,
Laura, Laura, I think those questions will be really valuable for our next steps because we do have the questions that we have that we want to answer, but what are the questions that everybody out there has about this wage grid and the recommendation and the non-salary compensation? So I think those questions will definitely help us set the next steps.
Yes, thank you. And we'll get those questions to you guys as soon as possible. So I just want to end. We have the gift of time, which is fantastic. That doesn't happen very often in our field. I just want to end off saying the conversation has started. And I think we all have a better understanding, or maybe I should say a better appreciation for the complexity of the research that your team put in there. It seems once you, even going through all these questions and hearing what you guys have to say about each of the salary grades, and that is, once you uncover one thing, you think, yay, and then, but you have so many more layers to that and so many more perspectives and questions that come from that one foundational piece that you researched. And so it's a lot of work to uncover, and I appreciate that you guys take the effort, especially over the last year and a half. And I'm sure it's been longer than that in essence of everything, but we want to appreciate that. I love the fact that it is so inclusive. It still amazes me how much your collaborative research went all across Canada, and it's ongoing. You guys have really kind of dug into the associations to key people all across Canada, and I really appreciated Lorena. I think it was Lorena's story that you had shared at the beginning, because I know myself and others can really relate to her comment to you guys in the beginning, and that was a nice spark, because I know that touched me. The second thing that I just want to leave everybody else with is on one of the slides, the team had put, show how much care work is worth. That really resonated with me because I really feel that this is showing that evidence-based research where we get that buy-in and that understanding from key people and our field. But without that evidence-based research, we probably wouldn't have that buy-in to show how much our care and our care work is worth. So leave that little key concept with everybody. And like I said, keep the conversation going. Stay in touch with AECE. We share Mary Frances' team's work quite frequently, and we will continue to do so. And maybe we'll see them back for Connect in the future.
Thank you, Christy. I think Laura is going to put a link in the chat about expression of interest if anybody is interested in signing up for community engagement with us.
Were you looking specifically for operators? I know you had mentioned that earlier.
Whoever's interested.
Okay, good, good.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous night. We'll stay on a little bit longer in case more people want to put questions in or show their expression of interest. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Yeah, so I just put the link in. Oh, I guess I did that to organizers only. Let's fix that. So whoever would like to join in with this engagement and stuff, submit a expression of interest here. I just put the link in the chat. But it should be, if you do a search on our website too of just Wade Grid engagement, you'll find it on there. I'll make sure to include it on the, and why is the page showing as not found? Okay, I will look into that. This link will remain the same. I will look into why it's saying page not found. Couple of good questions. Are you guys okay with the slideshow being shared as an attachment, or would you prefer not?
Laura, they could probably also get it from the recording. And I know I took a couple pictures off the recording on some key slides, so they might want to do that as well.
Sure. Yeah, so tomorrow then the recording will be posted on the AECE website. Just if you go to the same page where you went to register, just to AECE Connect. And on that page, there's a link for past webinars. That's where it'll be. So we will have that.
Good. Thank you for putting your expression of interest, everyone. That'll be helpful to Mary Frances's team. So,
yeah.
Yeah, as we organize the next steps. There's a lot of engagement happening right now. We know the sector's a little stressed. It's a lot happening for them right now. So we're hoping to take just a little bit of a breather from that and maybe start in April or May with community engagement. There's a lot going on right now.
Someone had said, thank you for putting the educators' voices through this. Yes. That's where those, the evidence-based research is incredibly important, but so are those anecdotal pieces, Lorena's comments, those pieces are the ones that touch people. So you have a nice balance of both.
Awesome. That's what we're really hoping with the qualitative research, is that the next iteration of this project and the report is that it includes the ECE voices. I would say even past ones as well, right? Those that maybe have left the field or left and come back, and there's such different stories out there, a variety of stories. So there really is, Christy. You know, when we were talking one afternoon in one of our team meetings, we were reflecting on who was in the room, and there were so many certified ECEs in that room, and of course none of us were in direct care. But we're still interested, we're still engaged, we're still involved, we're in the periphery of that direct care, right? So we actually don't know how much the sector knows, because we don't know who's working in the periphery, who's got the masters, who's got the PhDs, who's doing the, doing the pedagogical supports. Yes. So there's lots of stuff that we really want to dig into and understand.
Yeah, and I think your presentation tonight really gave that across. I think even for myself being in the field for 30 years and not realizing well, acknowledging the complexities, but not really knowing what that looks like for research and to present to government and other participants, right, key stakeholders. So yeah, what you guys have done is just fantastic.
Thank you. We're hoping. If you have any like secret fund money that you don't mind sending our way.
I work in the field as well.
Right. Yeah, wrong person to ask.
Yeah.
Anybody a secret billionaire that wants to fund the sector?
Yeah.
Is there any secret billionaires on our call tonight?
Thank you everyone for the nice comments in the chat as well. So lots of things still coming in, so we'll wait a little bit longer. A lot of people said great work. Thank you for putting educators' voices, I mentioned. There is a couple questions around how to make connections to the $10 a day, right? How this is going to affect or impact, or how that is going to impact your research.
That's an excellent question. That's something we hadn't considered, is the affordability side of it. That was outside kind of the scope of our project. So we really wanted to focus on ECEs, right? And I think sometimes their voice gets left out. Like the childcare agreement is really about families, which is, but we need workers. So we need people, we need ECEs. So
I think that's part of our field though, right? We're always thinking about families, and then we see, right on the surface, we see $10 a day coming in. Well, what's coming out, right? Like, how do those two match up to benefit both? Yeah, that compassion field of ours.
Yeah. We donate time, don't we?
Yes. Yeah, I hope the childcare ministry will listen.
They've been supportive so far of hearing about it, so we're encouraged by that. The funding pathways to childcare are so complex, and it's not unique to Alberta. Many jurisdictions don't understand what care really costs because there's so many complexities to funding. It's not just parent fees in, it's just wages out. There's lots of factors involved, and at the end of our report, we kind of map it a little bit for Alberta, but it's incredibly complex.
It's tough to draw a really good visual picture for people. So many questions. Comments.
Not at this time, no. Just lots of comments. Good job, guys.
There's one for AECEA in there too. So
yeah.
The work that AECEA does is just stunning to me. Just how tirelessly everybody on that board and who's connected to the board work on behalf of ECEs. I'm speechless at some of the work that you guys do. It's amazing.
And over the years, I've really seen this collaboration piece too, right? Like the groups have really come together and just banded to share information, to get information. I'm proud to be part of the AECE board because of that, right? Like, and everybody around us is just kind of getting together, which is about time. We always say, unite, 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 one voice, one voice. Well, here we are, and we're moving forward. So
the network you folks have is amazing. The connections are fabulous.
Yeah. And of course, our AECE admin team works really hard behind the scenes.
Thank you, Laura.
And Diane and Cheyenne.
We need to hire somebody whose name rhymes with mine. It gets very confusing in the office.
Thank you. There's still 64 people online. I'm not sure if they just want to finish up typing or We want to make sure we get everybody's thoughts in there, because I always say to Mary Frances, this is the one time that we could really gather that statistics and data and right from the mouths of you guys. So I don't want to hang up now. I want to wait till everybody's had the opportunity to share. What can we do? Good question.
Support, endorse, advocate.
Participate in yeah.
Engage.
There's a few questions on day homes.
Yeah, that's another complexity. Because they're private businesses, and
there's a lot of different restrictions around that. Yeah.
We're not ignoring. We're just aware of the complexity.
Yeah. And there's only 3 of you right now, so thank you, everyone. Well, the comments are so neat to read.
I can't wait to see them.
Some of it too is questions around their particular situation and maybe advice, right? Which is not, I mean, I'm sure you guys won't answer that advice piece, but a lot of people are a little confused on how it would work for them, right? What does it look like? It'd be nice to have a resource piece to direct them, I guess.
What does that look like, do you think, Christy?
I don't know. I mean, I think whatever it looks like, it could really put in a lot of assurance in people. Because I think that's where the fear is driven, is how it's truly going to affect them personally, right? This one lady talks about her rent and what that looks like, right? And I don't know the answers to those, but I'd love to find somebody who could help her with that guidance. Because then her mind would be at ease and she'd be able to support this in a different way, right? Support this role in a different way. It was a really good question, and you can see it here on one of the lines. There's quite a few around that. What could I do if? It's more fear driven to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that did come up in our research, is, when people don't have financial well-being, we didn't want to use economic well-being, like we didn't want to use some terminology because it had this concept of like of being rich and wealthy, and we wanted to really think about this in a social determinant way of how does somebody feel safe and secure. Well, when they feel safe and secure, they've got financial security. When they have financial security, then they can pay their bills. When an unexpected dental bill comes across, it doesn't put them out. When their rent goes up, it doesn't put them out. There was an interesting study out of the States that was looking at when the states did a child poverty initiative, that there was other impacts, that actually violence and abuse for youth and children went down. Rates of incarceration went down. So when you look at people, financial stability, it has long-term other impacts. So yeah, she's right. What do you do when you're worried about rent? Well, you probably think about that a lot of the time to the day, right? Like, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my rent?
Yeah, I don't think we'll find anybody who doesn't agree with the wage grid, and that's agree that our people, our EC educators, need more money. We need a higher standard, of wages. But when you're an owner or an operator, what does that look like?
Yeah.
How does that look like? I know where my heart is, but I know where reality is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we want to interview a few different
Yes.
stakeholders.
Yes. All right, one more minute. I know we have about 40 people still online. One more minute and then I think we'll sign off. The questions and the comments are still coming in, which is fantastic. I love it. I think that's where my heart lies, is just hearing from you guys, because I know how important that is, to share your questions, because it tells us so much within everything you share. So. Yeah, succession planning, what does that look like in the field?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, Christy, the days of like, where do you go next in this career? When I was coming through the field, it was like, to be an LO was the ultimate end, right? You're like, oh,
Yes.
we did it. And there's so many more opportunities now, right? But how do we expand those opportunities?
Yeah, and still include those opportunities in all of this work that we do, right? Because now it's so much broader. Yeah. Yeah, we need more people.
Okay.
Is it time? Yes,
Yes.
it's time.
So the video will be posted on our social media and on the AECE website tomorrow once everything is processed. So keep an eye out for it. The link to that expression of interest will also be with the video as well.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to sign off. Laura, do you mind sending me these questions as well? And everybody have a good night. Thank you, Mary Frances, Abby, and I don't know if Miranda's still on, but thank you very much. She probably went to bed. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.